largely to cover up a scandal by Proroguing Parliament, largely the We charity scandal that you may have heard of back at the time. So this isn't unprecedented territory for the Liberal government. It is unprecedented territory for Trudeau, who's never been told he must step down by his entire party. That certainly hasn't happened. But the getting away with potential conflicts of interest and the getting away with potential fraud as a result of proroguing Parliament, so that, okay, all of these committee hearings, all of these things, we're going to pause them, and then we'll restart and probably won't talk about them again in the future. People's attention span will move on. That's happened before. That's happening again, even if he says, well, I'm doing it because the Conservatives have slowed down Parliament. Now, I want to get into another issue here because it relates directly to one of the biggest claims made by Trudeau in this speech that he just gave today, saying he would no longer be leader of the party. It comes down to the idea of Canadians trusting institutions. Canadians trusting institutions and having faith in these institutions. Now, many politicians will argue that Canadian faith in institutions is what helps our economy and our society run smoothly. If we all share a same trust of the same institutions, we can listen to them and we can know that what they're saying is true and that they are looking out for our best interests, and we can be more cohesive as a country. We can be more lock in step. We can hold the hands of our neighbors because we all share the same reality. And that may be true, that maybe there would be more social cohesion. But we're getting to a place in Canada where a lot of people, unfortunately, do not trust the institutions that they are beholden to. Where has that distrust come from? This is the question we're going to talk right now. We're going to talk about why they've lost this trust, but also why a lot of Canadians are getting so cynical about some of the biggest issues of the day. Many people believe that the environment is a very big issue in Canada. Many people believe that Indigenous reparations and reconciliation, that this stuff is important. And I'm not going to make the argument one way or the other. You can think what you want about that. But even for the people who are pushing this idea as this being the most important thing we need to think about, well, they're doing their own cause a vast disservice, because in my opinion, these causes have been used by politicians and by corporations to make more money instead of actually serving the resolution of these issues. Let's get into this because this is the next clip from the Trudeau press conference that we saw today, and I think you're going to find it pretty interesting. Let's listen in.
Pierre Poilievre in the next campaign.
Pierre Poilievre's vision for this country is not the right one for Canadians. Stopping the fight against climate change doesn't make sense. Backing off on the values and strength in diversity that Canada has always worked to pull itself together on is not the right path for the country. Attacking journalists, the CBC institutions, that's not what Canadians need in this moment. We need an ambitious, optimistic view of the future, and Pierre Poilievre is not offering that. And I look forward to the fight as progressives across this country stand up for the kind of vision for a better country that Canadians have always carried, despite the tremendous pressures around the world to think smaller, to veer towards the hard right, and to be less ambitious for what we can be and do as a country when the world really needs Canada.
This is so incredibly frustrating, I'm sure, for a lot of you to hear, especially people who agree with a lot of these values that Trudeau is espousing. These values that we need to be focused on the environment and making Canada a clean and safe place to be. Saying, Okay, we recognize the strength that diversity can bring us. These kinds of ideas that Trudeau has regularly pushed, ideas which, in my opinion, aren't entirely wrong. But you cannot blame Canadians. You cannot blame us for starting to question these ideals. At the very least, starting to question that if we elect our government to go and try to improve these areas of concern, will they do it? Or is this just a way to make us angry, make us upset, and make us believe that you're going to do something when really every good crisis, or what's the saying? What is the saying? It is never let a good crisis go to waste. These possibly very real problems are being used by corporations and being used by governments to funnel money into their preferred pockets. This is what happened with the Sustainable Development Fund. Companies that were given money were never checked in on to see, okay, what progress have you made here? What claims have you made here? How many emissions have you actually reduced? These aren't the questions that were asked, and people are starting to not trust the government because they're saying, hey, even if you say that you believe in these ideals, even if I agree with the way that you talk about them, I simply don't trust you to implement them, to implement these policies. How come if we're spending billions of dollars on sustainable development and a green, fitting ourselves for a green economy, how come we've seen our emissions go up and up and up, even relative to other countries? If we're spending more than we've ever spent on housing, how come we're not seeing more affordable housing for people? It's a lack of trust of people to actually execute on the things that they're talking about, and more and more people believing that, hey, they were never going to execute on it. This was never going to be something that was going to happen. Never let a good crisis to go to waste, and that's what we're seeing here. Now, he talks about Poilievre saying, we can't turn our back on the fight on climate change. Now, some people may believe that this isn't a big issue, climate change, the environment. I'm not here to convince you one way or the other, but let's take the perspective of somebody who's deeply concerned about the environment and is deeply concerned about carbon emissions and how much CO2 we're releasing into the environment. Let's take that perspective. Even if you are the most extreme environmentalist in the world, even if you're Greta Thunberg, the way that Canada has handled this whole file over the past decade has been entirely wrong, in my opinion. Right? We could be reducing global emissions so much more than we are right now with the way that we're doing things. We could be reducing global emissions. We have a lot of energy in Canada, a lot of access to energy, and a lot of that energy industry has not been developed. And I think that that's largely served American companies, the fact that Canada doesn't have the capacity to produce as much energy as we possibly could. And people, environmentalists, some will say, well, we can't be developing our energy industry. It will hurt the environment too much. But that is a very narrow way of looking at things, because people need energy in the world to survive, and they're going to get that energy from somewhere. Now, will they get it from us, where we can regulate it, where we can make sure our oil and gas industry is doing things as clean as they possibly can, or at least do it to an extent that we deem acceptable as Canadians, and that we can benefit from economically? Would we rather have Germany get their energy from us in that way, maybe liquefied natural gas? Or would we want them to turn to other areas that perhaps aren't as concerned about the environment, perhaps will process energy in dirtier ways, right? When we act so performatively in Canada, like we have to be the example for the world in the way that we do this. We've got to be the one who shows everybody how they should be acting. And if we all make ourselves martyrs for this cause, and we all act in this selfless way, if we all give up the economic upside of this, well, we will make the world a better place. But in reality, what you're doing is saying, no, I'm not going to have a strong economy that could benefit from the growth of this sector, but I'm also going to make the world more polluted and more and less clean because I'm shooing away possible customers for that energy and having them get it from places, maybe Persian Gulf states, maybe from China, these places that maybe don't have environmental interests at the top of their list when it comes to producing their energy. But you can't look at the other side of things when it comes to these people, right? If you say anything that is against the narrative of the environment, well, then your alternative solution, well, it just isn't ours. So you must be ending the fight against climate change, which I just think is simply not true. He talks about institutions and trust. Why should we trust these institutions? What is that trust in institutions actually doing? Who is it actually serving? More and more so, I'm starting to believe it's not you and me, the average Canadian. I'm starting to believe corporations, political, wealthy, well-connected elite. This is who a faith in these centralized institutions really serves. And even if you believe that any central institution is entirely well-functioning, it's good for us to have that central institution.